What's up, y'all? It's King Kong, and right now I'm taking over my pop's Instagram.
The tension inside the courtroom was already thick as fog when the unexpected storm broke out. The atmosphere was eerily quiet until Sean Diddy Combs entered, his face unreadable, flanked by high-profile attorneys and a tight security team. But what no one anticipated was the emotional powder keg waiting to explode just a few feet away: his own son. The judge had barely settled into the bench before whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs into open gasps. Something was about to go down, and everyone could feel it in the air.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was up. I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
As proceedings began, Diddy's legal team moved swiftly to file an emergency gag order, an aggressive attempt to block his son from testifying or speaking to the media. The courtroom paused. The judge narrowed his eyes, and then all attention turned to the young man sitting just behind the plaintiff's table, Diddy's son, visibly shaking with emotion. The move was seen by many as not just legal maneuvering, but a deeply personal betrayal. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but even without footage, word spread like wildfire. Diddy wasn't just fighting a case. He was trying to suppress his own blood.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent, and what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up.
That's when the courtroom erupted. Against the advice of his lawyers, Diddy's son stood up, his voice cracking but loud enough to echo across the room. "I'm not going to be quiet anymore," he declared, pointing a trembling finger at his father. "You've silenced me my whole life. This ends now." Gasps rang out. The judge called for order, banging his gavel repeatedly, but it was too late. The room was already spiraling into chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, while security rushed to restrain those shouting from the gallery. What followed was a storm of accusations, tears, and emotional breakdowns. Diddy sat stone-faced, only occasionally glancing at his son, whose pain was now on full display for the world to see. Family members in the gallery cried openly, and courtroom officers worked frantically to restore calm. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It had become a raw, public unraveling of a deeply fractured relationship. And in that moment, the glitz and fame, Diddy was known for faded into the background, replaced by the harsh light of truth and familial betrayal. As the courtroom slowly emptied and the echoes of shouting and gavel strikes faded into the walls, the scene outside had transformed into something almost cinematic. Reporters surrounded the courthouse steps like vultures circling a fresh carcass. Microphones were extended, questions shouted, cameras flashing in relentless bursts, all trying to get a word, a glance, anything from the man at the center of the storm. But it wasn't Diddy who walked out first. It was his son. With his shoulders square and his eyes red from what looked like both fury and tears, Diddy's son exited the building not with security or attorneys, but with a quiet dignity that only truth can offer. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The look on his face said everything, and in that moment, the public's gaze shifted. This was no longer just another celebrity family drama. It had become a narrative of power versus vulnerability, of wealth versus voice, of a father's silence against a son's truth. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs had crafted a legacy as a cultural titan, music mogul, business magnate, and charismatic icon. But now, that image was cracking, publicly, painfully, and perhaps irreversibly. The media went into overdrive. Within hours, headlines screamed across the internet. Diddy's son breaks silence in explosive courtroom showdown. Emotional outburst turns trial into family feud. Silencing attempt backfires for hip-hop mogul. What was initially a high-profile case took on a life of its own, fueled by speculation, leaked court documents, and emotional testimonials from people claiming to have witnessed similar attempts by Diddy to control or suppress those around him. Social media platforms became battlegrounds with hashtags like "Bah," "Let Him Speak," "Diddy Exposed," and My Truth in the Courtroom trending within hours. Influencers, former industry associates, and even a few bold celebrities chimed in, some in support of Diddy, others sharing cryptic messages that hinted they'd known this day would come. But beyond the headlines and hot takes, the emotional weight of what had just unfolded was starting to take root in the public consciousness. This wasn't just about money, reputation, or legal maneuvering. This was about a young man, Diddy's own flesh and blood, finally standing up in a system that rarely rewards honesty when it comes from within the same house. He wasn't just fighting his father, he was challenging a decades-long culture of silence and power dynamics that had festered behind closed doors in the entertainment world. Legal experts began dissecting the implications of the gag order attempt. Some called it standard practice, a legal strategy used to contain media damage. Others, however, saw it as a deeper, more disturbing trend among the ultra-powerful. The idea that wealth and influence can dictate not just narratives, but human truth. Civil rights attorneys weighed in on the broader message this case could send if the gag order had been upheld. Imagine a world where a father can stop his son from speaking, not just to protect a case, but to protect a reputation. One prominent legal analyst said on a primetime news panel, "That's not justice. That's control." Back in Diddy's camp, silence ruled. His legal team released a brief, sterilized statement about maintaining the integrity of the trial and respecting family privacy. But the damage had been done. The very act of trying to suppress his son's voice had unleashed something uncontrollable: public empathy. And once the people begin to empathize with the one who was silenced, no amount of press releases or PR spin can reverse the tide. Behind the scenes, people began to talk. Industry insiders hinted that this wasn't the first time Diddy had tried to shut down uncomfortable conversations. Rumors resurfaced about NDAs signed in his circle, about collaborators who mysteriously stopped working with him, about allegations that were whispered but never pursued. His brand deals were suddenly under review. A popular streaming service delayed a documentary collaboration indefinitely. Even a major alcohol brand quietly paused a marketing campaign featuring his image. Brands weren't just being cautious. They were afraid. Afraid that this story might not be isolated. Afraid that the public was finally listening. And at the heart of it all stood the young man who had simply refused to be silenced. His story became a lightning rod. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was familiar to so many. People related to him. Children of broken families, survivors of controlling parents, those who had been dismissed when they tried to speak. He didn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to be famous. He just had to be honest. And in that honesty, he became something more powerful than Diddy had ever been. He became relatable. Universities began citing the case in social psychology lectures. Podcasts dedicated episodes to exploring the toxic dynamics of parental control in powerful families. Mental health advocates praised the son's bravery in challenging a narrative of dominance. Meanwhile, conversations bubbled up across barbershops, college campuses, and kitchen tables. What happens when your parent is your oppressor? What do you do when speaking your truth threatens to destroy someone else's illusion of legacy? In the weeks that followed, the court proceedings became almost secondary to the larger cultural shift that was unfolding. The case would continue. Witnesses would be called, documents reviewed, legal decisions made. But the real judgment had already taken place in the court of public opinion. And in that arena, Diddy was no longer untouchable. For Diddy's son, the path ahead remained uncertain. The media attention was intense, and while some praised him as a truth-teller, others accused him of betrayal, of dragging personal matters into the public eye. But to many, he was a symbol of a generational reckoning. His voice had become a beacon for those whose own truths were buried under the weight of family expectations and generational silence. He had taken the risk, and while it cost him the illusion of family peace, it earned him something far more powerful: autonomy. As for Diddy, the empire he built on charisma, hustle, and larger-than-life ambition was facing its most personal threat yet, not from competitors, not from lawsuits, but from his own legacy. Because in the end, legacies aren't just about awards, records, or billion-dollar brands. They're about what your children say when the cameras are off and the contracts expire. And now, his child was speaking louder than any track he ever produced. The courtroom may have closed its doors that day, but the conversation was just beginning. A conversation about silence, truth, power, and what happens when the people we trust the most become the ones we must stand up to. Diddy tried to silence his son, but in doing so, he amplified him. And no matter how the legal case ends, one thing has already been decided in the hearts and minds of millions. Some voices refuse to be buried.